Hey y'all, welcome back to the Breaking Skin podcast. I'm your host, Kale Pearson, and today I'm going to be chatting with Ash Gonzalez. I really enjoyed this conversation with Ash. She is housed here in Austin at 444 Tattoo. Started her apprenticeship back in 2020. A lot of today's conversation centers around tattoo ethics. We kind of bullet through a lot of points in our conversation, but really everything leans into the things we as tattoo artists owe to our clients and to ourselves and to the practice. Tattoo ethics was something Ash really wanted to talk about when we started having a conversation about recording this episode with her. So I'm glad that we were able to cover a lot of ground in the hour of this episode. But you don't need to hear anything else from me. Here is my conversation with Ash. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your tattoo experience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, you can start. Tell me about how you got into tattooing, what triggered you. You've always loved it. Take it away.
Yeah, so honestly, it wasn't something that I was expecting to do for sure. I had always wanted to be an artist. That was something that I've been doing since I could draw. And my parents were very encouraging of like, it's hard to make it as a studio artist. You should kind of look at commercial options that could take you down a road that would actually make you some money. So for me, that was animation. I always wanted to be an animator. I've always been really into cartoons and character design specifically. So that was the path I was trying to take. I went to UT and did their digital arts and media program. And it was good. It was a good program, but about halfway through, like just going into my junior year, I started realizing just how limited the prospects actually are for that career path. Like almost all the jobs are, for one, located in LA, Ontario, New York, and I didn't really want to relocate there. I also just saw how limited the positions were and that they typically took people right out of like the California art schools and the New York art schools. And I was just going to a public university, so it just seemed even more limited. I was feeling really lost and disillusioned, which kind of led me to get a tattoo in the first place. I was like, oh, I've always thought these were cool and let me just get one, see what it's all about. And I just immediately fell in love with the environment of the whole thing. I went to the airport True Blue location, which I don't know if it's still there.
It just closed like super recently because of the highway expansion. But
yeah, okay, I thought it was something like that. It was Breeza that did my first tattoo, and she was just so amazing. She made me feel so comfortable. My girlfriend came with me and she was so welcoming to both of us. Just looking around the space, there were other female tattooers, and it sounds silly to say now, but like at the time I just thought like I saw them on Ink Master and I knew about Kat Von D, but I just didn't think it was an industry that females could really thrive in. So I was really influenced by that. I was like, wow, everybody there looked like they were actually having fun at work. And shortly before that, I had just gone on a school field trip to a game studio here. A lot of the program was also focused on like video game design and video game animation. And I can't tell you how opposite what I saw there was from the tattoo shop. Like I saw people who were just hunched over their computers and looked miserable. And the guy giving us the tour, he was like, yeah, we have a fridge full of Red Bull here. Like we like to grind and crunch. And I was like, that sounds horrible. Like I don't want to grind and crunch. I just want to make art. It was so different.
Funny. You would think like with animation, you would be like lighthearted and fun and chill. And then the tattoo shop would be like, from prior knowledge, you probably think the tattoo shop would be more like grimy. And then you get there and you're like, opposite.
Yeah. No, that was absolutely my experience. I was like just blown away by the chillness of the environment. Like I really only had TV and movies as my frame of reference, so I just did not know what to expect. But it was such a chill and comfortable place that people were making art. And I also had become aware of the fact that like it would probably be a very long time before my art might even make it into any kind of like animated project. I would probably be doing the grind work that like
Yeah.
they were talking about, and I had just become really disconnected from my actual art. It was all very technical, and just seeing this was really eye-opening for me. And I started like thinking about what it would be like if I did that. So I started asking around, like, how do you get into this? And of course, was told I should get an apprenticeship,
Sure.
which I know you know is very unofficial in Texas. So I got a lot of different advice on how to do that. But from talking to tattoo artists, I was mainly told, you really just have to have a portfolio, show it to a bunch of shops, see if anybody takes the bait and is interested. And so I did that. I had something of a portfolio from my time in school, but I got to work on like a very hand-drawn portfolio. They told me they'd really want to see handmade work rather than digital. So yeah, I spent like a year perfecting a portfolio. This ended up being 2019 to 2020. So we were in lockdown. I really didn't have anything else to do. So I just
Yeah.
really focused hard.
Did you
And
finish at UT or did you just start like mid college experience?
I did actually. Yeah, I had a scholarship. So I felt like I should just go ahead and finish it with the opportunity that I had and kind of have a backup plan, honestly. But
Sure.
yeah. Right after I finished, I did graduate in 2020. And
Cool.
yeah, I started showing my portfolio in March of 2021. I went to like 10 shops, got 9 no's, but that one yes was all it took to really get started.
Yeah, it's so scary to like, I've done that too, where you take your little portfolio and you're in the parking lot and you're like, I'm going in, like, gotta go try to talk to them and hopefully they're nice to me. And hopefully you did, even though they said no, they were still like kind and helpful.
Most were. There were a couple shops that I won't name that were not very kind to me and were like, why do you even want to do this? Like, you art school kids, they're all the same. You think you can just get into tattoos? And I was like,
Like,
I
okay, never
don't.
mind.
Yeah. It was like not very welcoming. But randomly, like this felt so much like a synchronicity to me. I saw one of my tattoo artists, somebody who had done a really big piece for me, in the parking lot outside of one of the shops, and he's like, "Hey, good to see you. What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm actually looking for an apprenticeship." And he asked to see my portfolio and saw it, and he was like, "Oh, you're gonna land one. I bet you land one today." And it's like, "Thank you. That's so nice of you." And sure enough, I did. So I think that little bit of encouragement, like, helped me come in maybe with a little more confidence. And yeah, it was really cool to have that moment just
Did you
organically.
reach back out and be like, hey, just so you know, you manifested with me?
I
And
did. I did. And he was like, "That's so great. Come see me anytime. We'll celebrate." And yeah, that was awesome. That was Jason Wayne, also from True Blue. So thank you, Jason. That really meant a lot to me.
oh, you do have like a true blue connection.
I do. Yeah. I asked there, but they told me they just don't take apprentices, which makes sense. They're such an old shop.
Yeah, they're busy. Makes sense. Are you originally from Texas?
Yeah, I'm from Austin actually.
Love it. A local, true local.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, so you got your yes in your apprenticeship. Did you start right away or did you like have a period of waiting?
I did start right away. It was pretty typical, I think, from what I've heard about the experience. Started with like cleaning and breaking down, setting up a station, learning all about cross contamination, got my BPP certification, and it was about 6 months of shadowing other tattoo artists at the shop and my mentor, breaking down, setting up until I had that down, until I finally got to hold a tattoo machine and I learned how to break down, set up a coil machine. So it was a lot about the fundamentals of the non tattooing part about the process for me, with a lot of drawing, of course, as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's pretty normal. But when you're in it and you're in the apprenticeship, you're like, when are they going to let me pick up a machine? When am I going to get to do this? But it's like so normal to have to wait.
Yeah, I was very wary of like the experience I've heard people describe of like just mopping for a year before they even talked about letting them tattoo. But from the beginning, they gave me like a really clear timeline. They had pretty much told me about 6 months in was when I might start tattooing. So that was cool.
That's so nice and also
Mhm.
so rare to have a curriculum in Texas.
Absolutely. I feel fortunate for that experience. I had a pretty good apprenticeship.
Okay. Did they hire you on after that, or did you kind of like move on to your next?
Yeah, I ended up doing a year after my apprenticeship there. I definitely felt a little bit obligated to do that. Also, I am like the one in a million case where they did pay me for my time there. I made minimum wage and I only was allowed to work 20 hours a week, but that was enough to make it so that I didn't have to have a second job. I did rely a lot on my partner for support during that time, but
Yeah,
yes, I firmly believe now that all apprenticeships should have like some form of compensation because like I wouldn't have been able to do it without that.
that's amazing because I feel I've heard of free and I paid and was
Mm.
told it was like going to school.
Right.
So yeah, to be compensated, it's almost like internships when you're in college and they're like, you can do free labor, but getting paid makes it you really show up and work because you're like, this is my job essentially.
Absolutely. And their structure was such that like they were like, we're paying you to work. Like I was essentially the shop assistant and the receptionist at that time. So when I was actually tattooing, I'm still grateful for my clients for actually doing this with me. I was coming to work at 7 in the morning to do my tattoos. So they took so long at that time. I would like do like a 3 hour tattoo. Then at 10 a.m. the shop would start and then I would be paid, but I wasn't paid for any of the time that like I spent doing something that would only benefit me. So I think
Yeah,
that was how they
that
justified
makes
it.
sense. I feel
Yeah.
like that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so you finished your year and then you got into this other shop after spending a year there. How was picking up clients for you? Were you taking walk-ins? Were you like heavy social media or like how'd you get your ball rolling?
It was a tough transition actually. I had always known about the shop. It was Companion Tattoo at the time and was like starstruck by like how good everybody was there, and they just happened to be relocating and expanding their staff, and I just like at the right time noticed this, asked the right people, but they're a private studio and I was definitely in a street shop before. It was like very heavily walk-in based and they're also on the opposite sides of town, so a lot of clients unfortunately like felt like they couldn't follow me, which I understood. I did have to kind of start really heavily social media promotion at that point. I ran some ads and I just tried to be really diligent about posting flash, but it was a scary transition from like working for a shop that was like a shop split and they provided a lot of my clientele to like totally running my own business essentially. It was very scary.
Yeah. When did you join there? What year did you go to Companion?
I think that was March of 2022.
That's awesome. Very cool. Do you feel like the art that you were doing pre-tattooing, like when you were learning about animation, translates now to the work you're doing or your style?
Yeah, I absolutely feel like it has like a lot of influence on the subjects that I like to draw and depict. I had to learn a lot about bringing life to my drawings, and I feel like that was like immensely helpful when doing a tattoo. Like just yesterday I was working on like a piece. Like I feel like if I tried to draw that 3 years ago when I first started, it may have just looked like the two elements that were like really just stiff pasted onto the screen. But I feel like as I've like learned more about tattooing and then also been able to like more apply the things that I learned in school, like I now like know how to use like a line of action to give the characters like movement, and I definitely think of like the subjects that I'm depicting as characters, I guess. So in that way it definitely is a part of my process.
That's such a good point. I guess I didn't think about that, like line of action character development specifically.
Mhm.
I feel like that also speaks to the importance of like continuing to fine tune your art outside of tattooing and just continuing to learn stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important to have non-tattoo influences in your work. Like I have really been leaning into like folk art motifs in my work, and that was always a style that I was just really drawn to when I first got into tattooing. But I realized like I think the reason I liked it so much was because I had something of a personal connection to it. My
Yeah.
grandparents, my dad's side, they're Polish and Canarian, which are both really heavily folk art centric cultures. And I never actually got to meet my grandparents. They both passed while I was a baby. So it kind of gives me this feeling that I'm connecting to them and like my heritage in some way because I didn't get to have that experience. So I'm like retroactively connecting to it myself and doing my own research on the culture and combining the elements because actually it's like weirdly very common in the area that they're from for Polish and Mexican people to merge. There's like a huge mixed community there, and Chicago is where they're from. And I feel like combining the two elements, like Mexican and Polish folk art, is like reminiscent of like this whole other subculture that actually exists that I feel like a lot of people don't know about.
That is so special. Have you gotten to like, have you considered or gotten to go guest spot in that neighborhood or back in Poland?
I would really love to do that. I actually still have yet to do a guest spot. So, yeah, it's something I really hope to do this year. And I would absolutely have my sight set on a place like that I had some kind of connection to or would like to explore a little bit more. I know there's like museums in Chicago for this community. So, yeah, I'd love to do something like that.
That'd be so sick, especially if you could work with the museum in some way, do like a little collab. That'd be pretty cool.
Ooh, I like
Um, I guess kind of jumping topics through your lens and your experiences being a companion 444, the walk and shop environment. What's it been like being a woman in such a Wild West male dominated space?
It's been something of a wild ride. I think starting where I did at a walk-in shop, it was much more noticeable that it stood out a little bit. And Round Rock is, I consider something of a small town. So there were some people in there who I think were just really not up on like how the industry has changed. So I would have the experience where like a group of male friends would come in and they'd be like, we want tattoos. And they'd look at my mentor who was a male and they'd be like, when's he available? And I'd be like, I'm actually available right now. And they would be like, really? And they definitely thought I was the receptionist. Like long after I was an apprentice, had a station and everything, they'd be like, you work here? Like I got that question so many times.
You know what? Now that you say that, I also have been asked that question many times, and I did never like clicked for me. But you
Yeah.
would be like kind of sitting at the front drawing or whatever, and then they'd be like, "You tattoo?"
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
Yeah. What do you see me doing? Wow. Yes, that happened countless times. So I feel like once people like realize like, okay, she is an artist and like I would show them my Instagram to prove that I did in fact tattoo, they would get a little more comfortable with it. I had some kind of experiences where I felt like maybe there was some flirtatious vibes or something, which was a little uncomfortable, but luckily there were always other people at the shop, so nothing really crossed any lines. But my biggest reminder that the industry is still a little behind was just, yeah, that constant questioning about whether I was actually a tattoo artist.
Definitely. I don't know if you ever had this too. I can think of specific instances where people almost the opposite because you're a woman being like, I don't want to be tattooed by him. I want to be tattooed by the blonde or something. And you're like, actually, now I prefer not to make money today. So I'm just gonna, I'm like, I'm busy. I suddenly I am so busy I cannot see you.
Suddenly I have a big drawing I need to finish. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be so wild. I had a friend I worked with who her first day, she relocated here from Pennsylvania. First day had a walk-in client trying to grab her hand. Were we going to dinner tonight? Da 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 da. And she is like such a sweetheart. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And then he came back the next day and was like, you overcharged me. It was crazy.
No, it's like every kind of worst client.
Yeah, being like, well, I thought it would be this much, and it's like below our shop minimum, so like that wouldn't even make sense. But you don't get those experiences anymore when you're in taking appointments.
No, definitely. The difference was night and day. Like people just one having a shop with such like a respected reputation, I think helped a lot. Like people don't come to a shop like Companion or 444 and think like they're getting a deal. Like they know they're making like some kind of an investment into a tattoo at a studio, and they're also sort of paying for that elevated experience. So I really haven't had any negative client experiences, maybe a couple, but nothing that was like anywhere to the extent of the other kind of shop.
Definitely. And I feel like it's also like through social media, through your social media, when they book with you, they know the vibe. It's not like a stranger walking in that like doesn't really care about who you are, what you stand for, and just wants a tattoo for as cheap as you can do it.
Right. Absolutely.
Love that. Let's talk about tattoo ethics. I feel like that's something that when we were talking about topics we want to touch on, you were really passionate about in the messages. So I would love to talk about some of those things and hear like your thoughts. So as far as being an ethical tattoo artist, when we're working with clients and we're talking about things that they want or how things are going to heal, what are your thoughts? How are your feelings on how we inform?
Yeah. I think just being as forthcoming as I can be is my general approach to any tattoo, but especially when a client is asking for something like really, really small, like under 3 inches. I always try to inform people about like how their tattoo will age. In general, I think this kind of leads me to do my work with a lot of traditional fundamentals. Like I think of it like if you do a tattoo and you can squint at it and still tell what it is, like to me, that's a tattoo that will look good or at least readable in 10 years. And I think that's like a huge part of what we do. I think my mentor even said something about this when I was starting. He was like, there's 3 components to our job. It's the drawing, the tattoo, and time. Like you have to give somebody something that you feel confident will still look good. At least that's something that's very important to me. So I'll do fine line tattoos, but I do inform clients of those risks, and I will always encourage people to go a little bigger whenever possible, while still reminding them like it is your tattoo and you can make the decision that you want it to look good today and you're okay with knowing it might age in a way that changes the look. So I think just informing clients is my priority. Like just making sure that I told them everything to the best of my knowledge about how their tattoo will perform over time and letting them make the decision from there.
Definitely. Do you feel like sometimes when they're like, I don't care, I still want it to be this small or in this location, despite the fact how it's going to heal? Do you find yourself being like,
It's tough. Like I feel like I never want to push anybody into anything, so I just kind of like wince a little bit when I'm making that stencil, and I just really hope that they like remember the conversation that we had, because when it does age and like the tiny tattoo is likely to like bleed a little bit and lose whatever readability it had, I hope they remember me telling them that. But I have this feeling enough time will pass that they'll be like, oh, the artist really botched my tattoo. And that I really hate. Like, I would never do that to somebody without a thought. You know, I would always consider how the tattoo would age. So I hope they consider, if they do decide to go against my advice, that I did try to warn them.
yeah, that is really hard because I know some people who are like, if it gets too small, they'll be like, well, I'm just not going to do it. But at the same time, it's like, this is what they want. So it is your choice if, as long as you're aware. I also sometimes try to be like, just so you know, in 10 years, we had this conversation, right? You remember when we're talking about these dainty finger tattoos and I showed you an example of Hailey Bieber or Ariana Grande. They're the fresh and the healed side by side. And I said, all the money in the world is not going to make these hold up. And then you hit me up and you're like, did they look bad? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to do if it's not a walk-in conversation, if it's somebody asking for like that side of the finger placement is so popular. I do hit them with the example photos, like just so they are aware, like it could look this bad if you actually like go through with this. And if they still want to do it at that point, they're okay with like 3 or 4 touch-ups over the years, then who am I to argue with that? But
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
I
I
have,
agree 100%. I just still get the message that it's like,
yeah, absolutely.
I have heard of people adding that bit to their consent form if it's something like that to be like, we talked about how this is going to look, right? And then they consent form.
I like that idea. Maybe I'll add something like that because, yeah, we do talk about it, but it would be nice to have that acknowledged.
Yeah, just so, and maybe they'll remember better if you're like very specific. I don't know, or a separate consent form. When it comes to tattoo ethics in your work, let's talk about the idea of like taking flash or not making original things, plagiarism, pop culture, or even small artists. What have your experiences been, or what have you seen?
Yeah, I think pop culture tattoos, I try to think of it as like it's one of the oldest forms of tattooing ever. Like Sailor Jerry was drawing Betty Boop Flash back whenever he made that. Like it's absolutely always been a part of tattooing as we know it in America. Like we love pop culture here. So I think it's absolutely unavoidable that people are going to want licensed characters, intellectual property
Album
that is
covers, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it gets tricky because at the end of the day that's not our media. Like we don't own that, so we really can't be responsible for what happens when that brand alleges that we're infringing on their trademarks. Like that unfortunately is true. So I know some brands like Harry Potter and Nintendo have actually cracked down on that, and that makes me feel like in my own, like my Flash and my original designs, I try to not center them too much around pop culture just for the possibility of this happening. Like if we see they take this a step further and other brands start really like coming down on artists, I wouldn't want like half my portfolio to get taken down, you know?
Sure. I'm curious because I feel like I haven't seen any like repercussion from brands like that when it comes to tattooing. What you've seen?
I've seen in some of the tattoo groups that I'm in on like Facebook and I think Reddit, I've seen mention of like cease and desist letters and like mostly telling them just to take the post down. Don't post anything about this anywhere. They'll tell them, I think, to not do the tattoos, period, but they can't know about that. They just, I think, don't want it being used to promote their brand, especially like you remember when J.K. Rowling started going in this unhinged tangent about trans people. And some people, I think, got like reactionary tattoos where they would like add symbolism to their existing Harry Potter tattoo to show like they still liked the franchise, but they didn't agree with the message. And maybe that has something to do with why they started taking it so seriously. But I've heard of at least a few Harry Potter tattoos specifically being taken down, which is just crazy to me that they would even use their energy and litigation on that. But apparently they just really don't like not being in control of the brand image.
That's so interesting. Did you follow? I think it was Kat Von D who had that lawsuit with the photographer.
Yes. Yeah, that was crazy.
It was, I remember thinking like this is going to change if she lost. This is going to change the way, but she won. So I'm like, what? That's like sets a precedent for like how lawsuits would probably go in the future. Granted, it's Nintendo and like they're obviously throwing a lot more money than this photographer, I would imagine, into a
Yeah.
lawsuit. But it would be interesting to see, I guess, legally where the lines are if she made it out unscathed to where the little guys sit.
Right. Yeah, I guess we haven't seen until the last like 10 years really like any legal involvement in tattoo trademarks and individuality as far as like legal ownership goes of the work, but I'm sure we're going to start seeing more of it, especially after that case, like you said. I remember also seeing like in one of the NBA 2K games, an artist tried to sue for including his tattoos on one of the players, and I believe he lost actually.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering if it like once it turns into like a new form of art, if that's what if I like take an artist's photo and then tattoo a replica, if that's when it becomes mine, not theirs. I'm not really sure. I have signed as a tattoo artist for photos at a client who's in a Starbucks commercial, and so like her hands are seen, and she has my hand tattoo, or I've tattooed her hands. So I've signed paperwork for that, but I also have had clients in other commercials that they're like, I didn't sign anything. So I'm like, is there like where I don't know where the lines are. I feel blurred, but maybe they're written out more clearly somewhere.
Yeah, as far as that goes, I can't say that I know enough about what that means for the future of tattooing, but I definitely think we're going to start seeing more news about similar cases to this.
Say you're probably right. Especially if someone's like, I can make a buck off of this. Like now that tattoos, it's like it's so normal.
Mhm.
Everybody has a tattoo artist friend. So it's like I would say you're probably exactly right. When it comes to like Flash and people copying Flash. Have you seen a lot of that or experienced that at all?
Yeah. Sometimes I do feel like Instagram has really had an influence on that. Like, and sometimes I don't even think it's intentional. Like, I think we're just fed so much media constantly on a loop through sites like Instagram that sometimes you might see an idea and forget you saw it and think it's an original idea. Like, I know that's happened to me before. And as soon as I realize, like, oh, I actually saw something really similar to this last week, I see it in my saves. Like, I feel like I shouldn't go through with posting it. Like, if I feel like there's too much of an influence of whatever I saw, but some things, it's tricky. Like, there are some tattoo motifs that have been around forever, and it's hard to say who has ownership of the original idea on that. Like, I feel like even a little iffy about, like, I use the Cupid character a lot. I'm a really big
Yeah.
Cupid fan. And that is still a trademarked character. So I'm like, I don't know. When I make art with a Cupid in it, I'm like, do they like the art or do they like the Cupid? So I feel like I think I already said this, but I try not to center my work too much around characters because I want to know that clients like my art. They're not just like they
Yeah.
would like anything with a character that they liked in it.
Yeah. When people bring designs and then are like, oh, something like this, and then you like mock it up and they're like, no, I actually want the exact same thing I just showed you. I'm always like, now we have an ethical dilemma. Now we have a problem.
Yeah,
So
I still have not figured out like the best, most graceful way to handle this. Sometimes I have reached out to the original artist and said, like, I'm not going to post this, but I just want you to be aware in case my client does that I was asked to replicate your tattoo, but I'm not going to claim ownership of the design. And typically people are cool about it. I think I would be fine with it if somebody came to me in that way. But I also think about it like I would be pretty upset if I saw a copy of one of my exact designs. So I do have a section in my booking form that says I will not replicate another artist's tattoo. And I think that does dissuade people a little bit from doing that. But sometimes I think it's hard for clients to articulate exactly what they want. Like they see something they want and they're like, yes, that's what I want. But they can't. I try to encourage them to tell me, like, why do you like this? Is it the line work? Is it the shading style? Because I can emulate that, but I don't want to copy the design.
yeah, it also like takes away from your creative juice. I 100% agree. It's such a like friction, or even like when people are like, I want this very same cow. I've done the same cowboy boot design, same reference. Like I have a version now that's like a little, it's different, but it truly have been sent the same exact reference from Pinterest like 12 times. Same boot.
I am sure that I've done that boot as well.
Probably. Absolutely you have.
That's a whole can of worms in itself, Pinterest, because people's tattoos and like original Flash will get posted there. So people bring me like a screenshot of a Flash sheet from somebody else. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like that just feels so wrong to me.
Definitely. The worst is when you know whose Flash it is. You're like, that's my friend.
Oh my God, literally my friends. Yes, like people I personally know. And I know like they'll post, the imitations that they see as they come up. And most people think it's funny, but like it's just crazy, I think, to me that artists would actually go through with doing it.
Yeah, I had one person bring me a design that was straight up a screenshot of a Flash of someone that I work with and like boothed with at a convention. And I was like, no, we can do like a similar vibe, I guess, but like, also, why don't you just go to them? Like, we're literally in the same studio.
Yeah, that's just egregious.
I messaged them like a day later and they're like, actually, I just went and got it at a walk in shop anyway. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Well, they get what they pay for when they do that. Like it always looks better when the proper person actually does it. So you'll be getting a knockoff, and that's their business.
Definitely. I have a friend who this just happened like last week. They tattoo in Austin, and some other artist, I'm not sure that they were in Austin, shared their post and was like, I'll do this same tattoo for $60. Like straight up sent the post to their story and was like, this tattoo from this other artist Instagram, I'll do it for you for the exact same design for cheap. That's ballsy. That's crazy. You're straight up like, That's me going to you and be like, I'm gonna take your art and I don't care.
I mean, how can you expect other tattoo artists to respect you if they see you doing that? Like, that's, I don't know. That speaks to your integrity, I think, if you're just willing to shamelessly steal from people. I feel pretty strongly about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. I've also heard of people being like, this is the design I want. And then they're like, oh, that's, I want you to do it, but it's out of my budget. So I'm going to go to this person. And then when it's bad, they come back to you and are like, well, can you fix the thing now?
Like, how insulting. I don't know if they know how insulting it is, but as the artist, it's just like, oh my God. Okay, like sometimes I'll consider it depending on how respectful they are about it or if they really eat their words, but a lot of time
Seriously.
that's no.
Let's talk about ashes and tattooing. How I'm sure you've been asked. I feel like a lot of people have been asked by now. Thanks to, shout out to probably Facebook.
Yeah.
What is your response when people ask about putting their family members' ashes in tattoos?
I feel like it's one of those things that is just too recent for me to feel like I can confidently say is safe. I was doing a little research on this because I was like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And I saw like a few crematoriums like had it in their FAQ and they said like, yes, it's totally safe. The ashes are sterilized from the heat. But I was like, how do we know how the client is handling the ashes in between getting them from the crematorium to us? Like they could be putting their bare hands in there. I mean, how can we guarantee it's safe? I don't feel like we can. And also, I don't feel like we can know how this will affect a tattoo long term because it simply hasn't been done for long enough. So I've done it once. It was an entire family came in and they actually rented out our shop. Like they paid us all just a day rate and we did a bunch of memorial tattoos for like 10 people. And they all wanted ashes and it was so surreal, like taking that pinch and putting it in the ink. I was just like, this is a person in my hands. Like I just felt like energetically something about it felt a little weird to me, to be honest. So I I don't know. It's tricky because I know that's very meaningful to people, like the idea of memorializing somebody they love in that way. I even had requests for pet ashes, but something about it just felt odd to me. And the fact that I can't guarantee the safety or even how the tattoo is going to look like later in life, I don't know. It's a no for me as for now, but I don't judge anybody for wanting.
Definitely. I also was reading on Reddit about it. I feel like a couple weeks ago, and someone was like, I actually work at a crematorium, and I can tell you that sometimes those ashes get dropped on the ground and swept up with a standard broom and dustpan and then tossed in a bag. So do with that as you will. What I usually recommend, it's like kind of expensive. It's like $200 or plus, I'm pretty sure. Is there services that you can mail the ashes to and they will process it into ink in their
Okay.
own way. So I've been like, here are two companies I've found that do this. If you want to order the ink and bring the ink, I'll probably have a separate consent form for this whole thing. But I feel better about that.
That definitely sounds like a safer option because they would take the extra time to make sure it was sterilized. I don't even know that like the consistency of the ink, like I didn't know how much ash to add for the ratio. It was like difficult for me to even know how to do it. It's not something we get trained in. So yeah, I think that's probably the direction I'm going to direct people to in the future as well.
I feel the same exact way. I'm like, this is all of a sudden this ink is like not gonna be usable. It's gonna be like it's gonna get messed up. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel the exact same way. When it comes to minors and tattooing, let's talk about that. Have you been asked by minors to get tattooed? What have you seen?
I have definitely seen, not at my current shop, but at the walk-in shop that I was working at. For one, I don't think people are like fully informed about the law because Texas has like a very special clause that's like a parent can sign off for a tattoo if it's ordained by a judge and deemed justifiable to cover an offensive tattoo, like a gang
Yeah.
tattoo or something like I think somebody I knew like had like a stick and poked penis and was able to get this like exception made. But that's it. So, but I think people would see the parental consent thing and think like, oh, so if a parent comes and signs off on it, it's okay. And it is like that in other states. So I had that experience a few times where somebody would come in, not disclose that they were a minor, come in with their parent and be like, what do we need to sign? And I'd be like, oh, you can't, there's nothing to sign.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting, very state by state. The state I'm from Kansas, it is 16 with parent consent, but I've also had people fully book an appointment, pay a deposit, and then they're like, "So my parents are coming, what do we need to bring?" And I'm like, and they're like coming for vacation. And I'm like, nothing. It's on your little thing that you filled out that says
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And then you see like we had kind of talked about that child who got the American flag tattoo that like broke the internet there for a second. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. I I have so many feelings about that. Like I know I heard the artist's justification, which was that the child wanted just like the Trump 2025 logo. Like they just really wanted something to honor Donald Trump. And he talked them into changing it into an American flag. And his justification was if I didn't do it, they would just ask around until they found somebody that did. And so, in his eyes, he was saving an even more regrettable tattoo from happening. But I just think 9 years old. I mean, that's a baby. That's like anybody under the age of 18 is a minor, but like that's a really, really young kid. And shame on the parents, really, for even entertaining this idea. Like, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. I think it's morally very questionable to allow something like that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially something so impermanent. Like they wanted a political thing like that. People change their minds on things all the time. So like to put it on your child is really intense. Who
Mhm.
you talk about healing? That little kid's body is gonna change so much. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. That's where I'm like, I don't think I could. I know I understand maybe where this artist is like thinks they're doing something good, but I could not sleep
Mhm.
doing
No, yeah, I felt the same way. Like I got where he was coming from, that he wanted to prevent the Trump tattoo from happening, but you still did a tattoo on a 9-year-old. Like maybe you could have just told them what you really thought and let them make that decision, or talk to them about the American flag and, try to convince them about that, but don't do the tattoo. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I know he was getting death threats and like is probably kind of ousted from the community at this point. Like that's a reputation that's going to follow you. But I sort of see what he was trying to do. I'll say that.
I think I feel the exact same way, where it's like I want to be empathetic, but also I am in the industry, so it's like I have a personal feeling at the same time. When it comes to social media,
Mhm.
have you seen or do you know people who are using Photoshop or AI on their work that goes out?
I don't think I personally know anyone that's doing this. Like a lot of times, definitely nobody at the shop that I currently work at. I see the tattoos that are being done and then them being posted later on. And I don't see any changes that indicate like false advertising at all. But I will see tattoos come across my feed and they just look like impossibly bright. Like some things I feel like I just know as a tattoo artist aren't possible. Or even like if they're not false, like they're heavily edited to the point that they look impossible. And I don't know. I don't think that that's doing a service to your clients. I feel like it is false advertising to an extent.
Setting bad
Um,
expectations for sure.
yeah. Or like there's no bleeding in that white, like it looks perfectly white. That's a little bit like hard to believe. And I feel like the tattoos usually would still look good without that extra like enhancement. I don't know.
Unrealistic thing. It's still cool. We know there's blood. That's fine.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
as
as
far
far
as
as yeah,
I am horrified to say that it's gotten to a point where I can't immediately tell. Like I have seen on Pinterest tattoos that like clients will submit to me as like a reference photo and I'm like, okay. And then like I go to like zoom in and see like how the artist did whatever technique and I'm like, actually doesn't seem possible. Like that's too much detail for this much zoom. Like how did they do that? And then something clicks and I'm like, oh my God, that's not even a real tattoo. And that's scary because I think that's only going to make clients be more susceptible to like scams.
Yeah, and unrealistic expectations. Like, I already used to work with someone who used to just Google like for references, like she wasn't looking on like Pinterest or anything else. And most of her Google image search results would be AI based. And then you have like a client come in with this reference and you have to go, okay, so this isn't real.
Mm,
Sorry.
like how awful to have to one shoot clients' dreams down like this. Like I've seen like impossibly small tattoos, or at least they look like they would be impossible in whatever area and however big they are, and like they come in fully expecting like that's something that we can do for them, and like to have to be the bearer of bad news like that, I hate it. And
Yeah.
I hate that like I've seen the deposit scams actually play out where people come to like our shop and they like come in like I have an appointment with Marco and we're like we don't have a Marco, and they're like really, they sent me this address and it just isn't real at all, and they paid like a $400 deposit.
Whoa. I haven't seen it in real life. That's so wild.
Yes, I've seen it like 3 times now, and it's so sad because I'll go to the page and like there are things that jump out to me, and like maybe, for any clients that are listening, like you really should look at the artist profile and look for like that human element. Like, are there real clients commenting on the photos? Do they have any tagged photos of them, even just like from a random event? Like, you have to be sure that it's a real person if you see this impossibly good work with like no comments and a brand new account that just started posting photos like a month ago. Like,
And a fat
unfortunately,
deposit.
yeah, like, and yeah, like an insane deposit. I feel like most artists don't ask for that unless they're like incredibly popular.
And then you would know they're real because you're seeing videos of them talking.
Right. Definitely.
That is so wild. I think this topic is really interesting, especially like I'm a white woman. I don't know your heritage, but cultural appropriation in tattoos, because we, especially being from a street shop, we see it all the time. What is your take on this? What have you experienced?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky topic for everyone because clients are going to ask for what they asked for, and there are obviously some things that fall in and out of popularity. One thing specifically that comes to mind is like Polynesian tattoos. Like I can say with certainty that I'm not qualified to do Polynesian style tattoos. Like I don't know the symbolism. I don't know how to incorporate that in a meaningful way into any of my designs. I could do the research, but it just wouldn't be authentic. Like it would be a cheap imitation. And I almost feel the same way about that as I do about copying someone's flash. Like that's not my culture. But at the same time, if somebody came in with imagery from like their specific tribe, like their indigenous tattoo style, and was like, I want this specific design and here's what it means to me, and I want you to do it, I think I would go ahead and do it because they actually like had their own connection to the work, and like kind of an honor to be chosen to be a part of that. But I think in that case, it would only be okay with me because like we both were informed about like the actual meaning and that it had an actual connection to the client. Whereas I feel like a lot of people that want Polynesian tattoos just like think they look cool. They just like want to like have a certain appearance. The Rock has them, and they think that it's like, I don't know, something that they should imitate. But I think it's a little bit iffy to even get tattoos like that, much less as the artist like try to do them. So to me, I would send them elsewhere. Like I would say that they should probably find a specialist in that style, maybe even like a Maori person, because that's out of my wheelhouse for sure. But I'm open to doing tattoos if somebody brings them to me with their own personal connection to the symbolism and can explain what it means.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. It's such a tricky topic, also because I have talked about it with like in the street shop I used to work in, and everyone had very different feelings on it because there are people who are just like, I'm gonna take the money and do the thing and straight up copy it off the internet. But I feel very similarly where it's like, one, I don't know, I'm tattooing on you. This isn't my culture. Two, I feel like we're taking advantage of people like and other tattoo artists from whatever culture it is who could be that's their practice. Like they've poured their heart and soul into this. And then three, if it's like some old dude pulling up in a sports car who just like, this is sick, I'm
Yeah.
surely going to say, I don't do this. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what to tell you. Or another one I've heard of people doing, and I think I heard this from, I don't know if you know are familiar with Drew Offwalla
Mhm.
from the internet. I listened to her podcast and they do talk about indigenous tattooing because
Mhm.
she is Samoan and to ask why do you want it? And then
Yeah.
like basically force them to be like, oh, I just think it's cool. And be like, why? I guess if you're really feeling bold, you don't have to like engage so drastically. But
Yeah.
that's such a good point. And they go through so much to do those things. So I guess full circle, I share the sentiment.
Mhm.
I would love to get like a little bit of a list of people in Austin because I also have people who have come to me and been like, this is my culture. These are the tattoos my family already has that I want. But it'd be cool if we had like a list of people that could be like, I know someone who has the same background as you and would kill this.
Yeah.
Link up.
I think that's probably the best first approach. Like, if for whatever reason they were like, I just really want you to do it, like I've tattooed them before or something, like
Yeah.
I would be okay with doing that. But I think probably the most responsible thing to do and will probably yield the best result for the client is to direct them to the proper person that does specialize in that style or maybe even is a part of that culture so that they're having like the most authentic connection to the origins of whatever tattoo.
Yeah. Yeah. I also get a lot of references from that people want like henna. And I feel very similar about that too, because I know it's such storytelling.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think now I'm like, I'm gonna make a list. I'm gonna do some research. I'm gonna get some names. Cool. I am so interested to hear what you know about laser removal. I'm so curious. Tell me what you know because I'm getting some done. So now I'm like, what is the
Oh,
long term
yeah.
effect of laser removal?
Yeah. I think the reason this came to mind when we were talking about topics in tattoo ethics is like I had just seen somebody post that like they had, I think it was lupus or some other autoimmune disease, and like the laser had a really, really like negative effect on their skin. Like it like caused like major scar to a level that was like beyond anything that could be fixed, like keloid scarring, and like they hadn't consulted with their doctor before like starting this process. So I don't know that that's like a common experience at all, but now that I know that that can happen, it definitely brought this to my mind. Like, what do we know about the long-term effects of laser removal, and like does that open you up to more health risks than just simply getting your tattoo covered up, or like the more laser you do, like, are you more susceptible to scarring or injury? But I've seen tattoos be successfully like removed to completely non-existent, and
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't look like the area is like damaged or permanently scarred, so it's obviously possible. But yeah, I think definitely there needs to be some kind of like doctor involvement if somebody knows that they've got a pre-existing condition.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm also so many questions for like who did they go to and did they fully inform their laser person about
Hmm.
their stuff beforehand? Because I feel like
Yeah,
that makes sense. Like autoimmune's gonna affect everything you do with your body.
definitely.
That's so interesting. I have so many questions and I'm also curious. I'm also curious what happens to the ink as it like gets dispersed in the skin and processed out. Gotta go
Hmm.
somewhere.
I wonder that as well. Like I'm sure there is like a scientific explanation that I'm just not fully aware of, but I know that like it's your white blood cells processing it as it like disperses from the laser, and it's interesting to me that it takes so many sessions to like get rid of it. Like it just, I guess the ink is really, really in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
How many?
also part of why it takes so long to not have damage is because they just want to be as slow and gentle as possible
Yeah.
to get there, I'd assume.
Yeah. I was a little surprised because I did inquire about laser removal to lighten something for a cover up, and I wasn't aware that like you're supposed to go 3 months healing between sessions, or at least that was what the person told me. Like, so if you really did commit to like getting something removed, it is going to be quite a commitment. And oh God, I've heard the sentiment from more than one client that's like, it's okay, I'll just get it lasered off if I don't like it. There is no just about lasering. Like, you are signing up for like the commitment of a lifetime. Like, imagine getting this tattoo 10 times. Like, that's the just laser removal you're talking about.
And so expensive. So
Yeah.
expensive. I mean, not for us because we tattoo, so we get it free, but it is such an expensive, painful, long process. And color, anything close to your skin tone is almost impossible to remove.
Really? Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know.
so that's what they warned me about with, I'm sure you've seen online, and I feel like this is also maybe false advertising. When people take pigment that is close to your skin tone to clean up the edges of a tattoo or to cover something altogether and they just roll over it.
Yeah.
If that heals bad, if it looks patchy, if it's not true to form, if you can still see the tattoo through it, which you probably can, when it
Mhm.
heals, they can't laser that at all. It will like turn
Oh,
dark. It will
yeah.
opposite effect. And then like yellows, greens, things like that that have an undertone with your skin, that
Yeah.
could take, talk about for life.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't know that. That I already felt iffy about that cover up technique, but now I definitely will never be looking into doing that because
Like, I don't know.
that's awful. And also, like, I've always thought like people's skin changes based on the season. So how can you even tattoo their like true skin tone?
That part too, exactly. It's, and I feel like once it heals, because to do cover ups, you have to use a darker tone. It's
Hmm.
not going to be darker,
Right.
really. So, yeah, I feel like I see that a lot, especially with like the fine line stuff from like 15 years ago, and then they just clean up the edges.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, if it seems too good to be true, it's usually not a good idea.
Yeah, I like that we also all think that we're being like so original with these ideas as if they didn't probably try it 20 years ago. It just wasn't on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. They learned a long time ago skin color tattoos are not a good idea, I'm sure.
Yeah. I did have someone ask me to do that to cover up bad eyebrow work. And it's like, that's really gonna mess you up, girl. But
Yeah.
in your tattoo career, coming back to you, how did you know that you made it? Or did you have a specific moment where you really got to reflect and be like, I'm a tattoo artist?
Yeah, I think for me, it was when I first realized that somebody was my regular. Like, they referred to me as like their tattoo artist. And they were like, I want you to do my full sleeve. I want you to do all my tattoos. Like, that was just so crazy to me. Like, really? Me? Like, I one at that time did not think that I was like skilled enough to be somebody that anybody would want to do all their tattoos, but like this person had been loyal to me, still comes to me actually, like since I was very, very new, and like was like totally okay with the fact that I was still learning and was open to me learning with them. And like I did offer like some of these more challenging pieces that were a little experimental for me at the beginning, like I'll fix them if needed as time goes on, but like she was totally open to all of that and was just like, I just really like your energy and your art. And like, I want you to be my tattoo artist. And yeah, she still comes to me today. Shout out to Kristen. She's awesome. And we're just continuing across the rest of her body. Like, we're pretty much done with her arm at this point. We're moving on to the leg. And I'm sure we've got a lot of sessions ahead of us. And yeah, just knowing that anybody would choose me as their artist, like, you have to be a real tattoo artist to be somebody's regular artist. So I think that was very affirming for me that like, wow, people could really like my art and like want to stick with me through this journey.
Yeah, for sure. How did that like impact you and your career? Did it like change kind of the way you operated?
Yeah, I think she was part of a group of people that made me start to realize like just how human this job is, like how much it's so much more about the connections you make, at least in what I'm doing for my practice, that you could do the best tattoo somebody's ever seen, but if you're not kind to them, if you don't make them feel welcomed, they probably will never come back to you. And my favorite interactions and usually my favorite projects that I do come from building these relationships that are from long-term tattooing of the same clients. Like we really start to get to know each other and what we both like. And there's like this beautiful synergy that happens when we combine both of our styles and tastes. And like, that's just something that can't be forced. Like you can't have that unless you do this job for a long time and really like build that rapport with clients. So I think that to me is like a really important aspect of this job that I definitely didn't consider going in.
Yeah. Yeah, the human emotion, especially if like it's not you came from an animation background, you weren't like necessarily leaning into that emotion with a connection to the person.
Definitely. It was like just me and the art, but like there's you, the art, and then the person getting the tattoo, and like they're just as important, and that it's like a real energy exchange to do that for somebody. Like it's really important to me to give them a good experience as much as I can contribute to that.
Absolutely. Do you have any specific like client moments that really stick out to you or that you think about often?
I think the ones that have really stood out to me are the clients that are still here. Like I have some people who started following me when I was just posting my art portfolio online, and like they saw the work and must have just seen some potential in me and like kept following me through my apprenticeship. Some of them got apprentice tattoos from me as I was learning, and some of them are still getting tattooed by me to this day. And I think that to me is like it's crazy for one thing, like just that they have seen me at so many different stages in this career, and also just that they I don't know, were willing to learn with me. Like that they were willing to take the chance on somebody who was pretty underdeveloped at the beginning, and like were okay with the fact that like I might not give them a perfect tattoo, but they
Yeah.
trusted me that like, or they were willing to give their skin to me to like become a better tattoo artist. That to me is really meaningful. And then I also had one experience that was really cool. I got to do the first tattoo of an actual practicing clown. Like she went to clown college, is in a troupe of clowns, and like performs and rides a unicycle like a real clown. And I'm the biggest clown fan. Like if you go to my station, I have a whole little like altar of clowns. So that was crazy. I got to like talk to her about that industry and her job experiences. She told me about like her performing troupe that they do this like, I had never heard of this. It was like a more grotesque style of like clownery. It's like more social commentary. So that led me down a rabbit hole of clown research, which is fascinating. And I just feel like I never would have met her without this job. And her first tattoo was a clown.
And you're like, and you got to do it. And that must have been
Yeah.
like so full circle for you. If you're like a fan of it, and then you're like, I'm doing it here with this person right now.
Yeah. I felt like that too. Like, when do you get to meet a clown in their like normal human form?
True, it's true. Have you gone to go see like one of their shows or anything?
No, I need to ask her for more details about that because from what I know, she's still performing. I think it's more like maybe a side project at this point for her, but yeah, like that really opened up a whole new world for me. Like, and that's another one of the coolest parts about this job, just getting to meet so many types of people and like expanding your horizons and learning so much about the world through our clients. That has definitely made an impact on me.
Absolutely. You really get to meet every part of humanity, it feels like sometimes.
Mhm.
That's so cool. Well, if you ever go to one of these clown shows, I wanna know what's up, how it's going.
Yeah, happy
That's
to share.
awesome. Now I'm gonna tattoo a clown. Okay. Do you have any like colleagues that are inspiring you right now, or people online that you're following that kind of fuel your creative energy?
Yeah. I I have definitely some reference points for other female tattoo artists that I think are doing really amazing work that is like similar to like some of the styles that I gravitate towards. Morgan Egan over at Classic Tattoo. She did my chest piece actually. She's
I was looking at it.
incredible. Yeah, she's amazing. She gave me some really great advice when I was an apprentice, and she's just been such a positive influence in my career. And then there's some other people across the United States, Britt Kuchenmeister, Ida Bloom, two artists that I really, really like. And then I also feel like outside of tattoos, I get really inspired by just like the everyday life around me living in Central Texas. Like I really connect with nature and plants and animals. I feel like I use a lot of that imagery in my work. And there's always been something really interesting to me about like making the mundane exciting. Like
Yeah.
obviously everybody likes flowers, but like something really important to me every time I capture a flower, I always want to add one of their leaves because I feel like the leaf is part of what makes the flower so beautiful. In that way, like I think my art is very inspired by taking what I think of as exciting and trying to make other people see it as exciting, even if it might not be on the surface.
Which is a cool part about being an artist. Like you really get to show the world what you're seeing through your lens. Special.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess we're getting towards the end. Is there anything specific that you want to share or talk about before we kind of start wrapping up?
Yeah, I think something that I feel really strongly about, and I've seen some people I follow talk about this, but I still hear this sentiment a lot that I think there's a lot of people out there who still think tattoos are not for them, like for a myriad of reasons. And not talking about like people who like don't want them at all, they just aren't into them. I mean like people who really think for whatever reason that they can't get tattooed, like that their skin is too dark or they're too old or like your body is too precious, and or that tattoos even are like too masculine for female clients. But uh I think that tattoos are and should always be for everyone. They should be about self expression and connecting with your own body. Like, I've heard many people say over the years that at a certain point their tattoos stopped having meaning. But for one thing, I think even saying that has meaning in itself. It means that you're like free spirited and you just like do what you want when you want it, and or you have a sense of humor. Like, I think all tattoos mean something, and I think they could be meaningful to everyone. So anybody out there that's on the fence about whether tattoos are for them or whether it's going to change who they are as a person, I think it could only enhance who you are if you go to the right artist and you really put some thought into what you want to get, or don't think about it and just get the first thing that comes to your mind. Whatever. It's really a powerful thing that can make people feel so much more at home in their bodies. And yeah, I think that you should open your mind to the possibility.
I love that. That's a great note to leave behind because we hear things like that often. People have a reason they don't feel comfy, but it's very freeing once you start.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and support you?
Yeah, right now my main platform is Instagram. If you want to get a look at my work, my handle is at zigzag_tattoo. And my website is where you can actually book a tattoo with me. It's just my name. It's Ash, ASH Gonzalez, GONZALEZ.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your history and thoughts with me and with whoever's listening. I just appreciate your time, and it was really cool to meet you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Well, talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Today's episode was completely edited, recorded, and produced by Kale Pearson. The music was mixed and edited by Dominic Gopal. You can find us on social media at Breaking Skin Pod. For more information, check out our website, breakingskinpod.com. You can find my social media at kale.tattoos. That's spelled Kail. To check out more of my work, visit kaletattoos.com. For more information on today's guest, you can find their social media in the show notes. Please come hang out every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Central Time for another episode of the Breaking Skin Pod. Thank you all for listening and hanging out. We really appreciate the support. Can't wait to see you next week. Cheers.